Hello and welcome to the vlog. Alright, let's get one thing out of the way straight away. Yes, I have had a haircut this morning. Yes, it is short, isn't it? That's the idea of haircuts. Right, with that done, we turn to the topic of today's vlog, which is the long-awaited, I like to imagine, updated boat tour. You may recall the original boat tour was when I just bought the boat. I don't think I'd actually moved aboard and the boat was still out of the water on the chocks at Yelvertoft, and all the stuff from the previous owners was still aboard. I hadn't moved any of my stuff on, so I thought it's about time I did a new boat tour. And I think I'm going to do this in possibly excruciating levels of detail, so I might conceivably have to split this into two videos. The upside of that, you get two vlogs. The upside for me, I get two chances for you to watch an advert before the videos and earn me some money. So, right, with that said, let's get on with the tour. So this is my boat. It was built in 2000. It's 55 feet 11 inches long. The hull, the shell, was built by G&J Reeves, and the internal fit-out by a company called Milburn Boats, who've sadly since gone into administration. At the front, a traditional rope fender, so that if I bang into anyone, it's a nice soft squashy bang, and not a hard thumpy metal one. Tying up when mooring is done on this T-stud, which is welded, as you can see, onto the boat, so it's nice and sturdy. Behind the T-stud is the gas locker, and this contains not one but two 13-kilogram cylinders of propane gas. I have my gas fed through this automatic changeover valve so that if one cylinder runs out of gas, this thing switches over to the other one seamlessly, which means there's no running out on a rainy night to switch the other cylinder on. Regular viewers will recall the immense amount of effort I went to repaint and de-rust the bottom of the gas locker, which, apart from being a bit stained with water residue, is actually staying nice and dry. Regular viewers will also recall there used to be a horn here until I squashed it onto a bridge. I've now taken it off and reattached the original boat's horn, which is inside the well deck. We'll come to that in a minute. Above where the horn was is this light, which seems to have about 1 candle power for all the good it does, and that's for seeing where you're going when you go through a tunnel. Running up the side of those is this pole, bolted with some screws and bolts and things through the wood of the cratch board, and that is, as you can see, my TV aerial, which is telescopic, so I can put it up and take it down as needed. As you can see, the boat is rather charmingly covered in this tarpaulin at the moment, and that's because of where it's moored, which is underneath this tree in which the birds sit and do their business, right down onto my roof. And rather than have that ruining the paintwork of the roof, I put the tarp up to catch it so that when I do move, which hopefully should be in a few weeks, I can just take the tarp off, bin it, and the roof is all fine. Oh look, a shiny chimney stove lid that I haven't yet knocked into the canal. That's a treat. At the back of the boat I've got two 240 watt solar panels, which in theory generate up to 40 amps. In reality I've seen about 29 amps on a really sunny day. Pretty good. And I very deliberately bought panels that are thin enough to leave a gap so you can walk up and down the roof, which is essential when you're trying to go through locks, especially on your own. This is a trad stern boat, which is to say you've got this very little stubby bit at the back where the tiller is, and immediately in front of that the cabin starts and you go inside. The orange lead you can see here is a shore power connection, which goes off to shore, funnily enough, and plugs into the mains there, so that if the sun doesn't come out and I haven't got any solar, I can just plug into the shoreline. I also use that to run my immersion heater in the mornings for hot water, because trying to run it off the batteries would absolutely kill the batteries. At the front of the boat is the well deck with the cratch cover over it. When I bought the boat, the cratch cover did not have the transparent side panels, which made it quite dark in there, so I had those installed. The side's just zip to release, and then you can go in. This is what the well deck looks like, and if you're thinking it's a little bit messy and why didn't I tidy up, well, it's because I'm living on this boat and things get messy, and I thought better show you it as it really is rather than some brochure stylised interpretation of canal life. So standing inside the well deck and having a look round, that is my water hose which I use to fill the tank. No, before you ask, it's not a food grade hose, it's just your bog standard ordinary hose. I'm not worried about plastic carcinogens coming off in the water. I really don't think that's something I'm worried about. You may worry, that's up to you. I'm not. The hole for the water tank is just down there. Some boats have them here, some boats have them out on the gunnels. There's no particular preference, I don't think. It's just how your boat builder chooses to make it. Behind the hose, you can see the original boat horn. The wiring to the one that I damaged came past here anyway, so all I did was reconnect it. And it's very loud. You don't want to be sitting in the well deck when I press the horn button, because you'll probably leap overboard. In the green bag there's a folding garden chair, which it's nice to take and put out on the towpath occasionally in the sunshine. Meanwhile, this is a step and a seat and the lid of the storage locker. Now you'll notice that it's divided into two parts. When I bought the boat it was one single chunk of wood, and trying to get it out so you could get into the storage locker underneath was an absolute nightmare. You pretty much had to empty everything out of the well deck so that you could move that lid backwards and out, and it was a right pain. When I had this cut done, many commentators said, oh, you'll get rain in there, and it really hasn't been a problem, and the convenience of being able to simply pull out one bit of it to get to the locker below has far outweighed any little bit of water that's got in. In the corner of the well deck I keep a little bottle of antibacterial hand wash, because there are many nasty and unpleasant things on the canals. I have an obscene amount of white spirit on board. That's because there is always some painting to do, and therefore always some brushes to be washed. That metal box is where you store the ashes from the fire before disposing of them once they're cool. And then over this side I've got a bag of wood offcuts which I use for kindling, and some coal. The table is nice in theory, but it takes up quite a lot of the well deck, so it does get in the way sometimes. It also tends to end up being used as a painting table, so it's not really in the best condition. It needs a bit of sanding and restaining or varnishing or something like that, really. Finally, in the corner there, for picnics, it's a cool box. Just before we step inside, in the corner there, is where the TV aerial comes into the boat. These are the front doors to my boat, which are steel, as you can see, with a wood insert and glazing, and at the bottom air vents, which are part of the BSS safety certification requirement. Mine is what they call a conventionally laid out boat with the saloon at the front, and that's what you're looking at now. First thing, of course, to notice, ooh, nice reclining chairs. Now that's a bit different to when I first bought the boat. I can only guess the prior owners assumed they were fitting out a conservatory rather than a boat, given their choice of furniture. It wasn't that uncomfortable, but I didn't want it as my lounge. So a week or so before my cruising earlier this year, I set to work dismantling the chairs. They inconveniently wouldn't fit straight through the boat doors, and then I took them to a charity shop which made £100 out of them. These are my replacements, two very comfy reclining armchairs for that Chandler and Joey moment. Perfect for a little light dozing or TV watching of an evening. Got some supplies in case the local cat comes to call, and some not so light reading, but as an ex-journalist I like to keep up to date on this stuff. That is the lovely painting, hold on, let's get that in shot, there we go, from the lovely ladies on the Narrowboat Experience. Do check out their channel. Now behind that you'll notice there's a blanket on top of something. That is 3 clothes airers and I put the blanket over them just to make them a little less obvious, really. It hides them away slightly and makes a good place to put the picture and the TV remote. Looking forward then in the saloon, on the right hand side, a barometer on the wall. You can just see my ukulele hiding behind the telly so that it's not played. The telly, which is very old and really rather rubbish Toshiba. Unfortunately, I'd like to get rid of that and get a new one, but it does the job, I suppose. Quite normal on a canal boat to have a car radio as your hi-fi source. I don't know if it's the radio that's rubbish or the loudspeakers, but it's dreadful. The sound in here is awful, so I don't really listen to it. To the right of that, the first of, I think, 3 fire extinguishers on the boat. Very important, of course, if you have a real fire, which I do. I'll come to that in a moment. And then under here, this is my Stargate Atlantis cupboard, which also houses the little TV aerial preamplifier, my Wi-Fi dongle, and a little USB charger thing. Below that is the vacuum cleaner. The step down into the saloon, incidentally, on my boat, as with many others, is actually a storage location. And if I can just open that up, miscellaneous tools. Roll of gaffer tape, very handy on a boat, pliers, spanners, you name it, they're all in there. Books, files, magazines, stationery, that kind of thing over to the left. And just at the top there, little hark back to my former career in broadcasting, a very ancient microphone, ribbon microphone, and behind that a clockwork, yes clockwork, 8mm cine camera. As for lighting in here, I've got several downlighters on the side of the cabin. Also a couple of ceiling lights. Everything's been converted to LED so as to minimise the draw on the batteries. Definitely worth doing. Looking to the left of the saloon then, you see the first of 3 radiators. These are normal type radiators with water in them. Gets heated up by a diesel fired Eberspatcher unit, which is in the engine room. As you can see, I've got my bath towel on it. That's not because I actually put the radiators on, but because of the stove, and therefore the saloon is by far and away the warmest room in the boat, and this gets nice and dry overnight. Here is where the saloon is both at its most glorious and also its messiest. Kindling in that one, not a lot there at the moment. Coal and the stove. This is a Villager Puffin, which I think is one of the smaller stoves that Villager make. Now, I've had some fairly derogatory comments about the metal foil behind the stove, mostly on aesthetic reasons, and I'm going to justify that foil. Firstly, I don't mind the look of it, and I'm the person who lives on this boat, so if you object to it, well, you don't live here, so it's not a problem. Secondly, it reflects the heat back from the stove into the saloon instead of going outwards. And thirdly, as this boat appears to have been built without heat-resistant fireboard behind the stove, I discovered the cupboard behind the stove was getting very, very, very hot indeed. And there have been cases of boats bursting into flames because the wood behind the stove very gently chars over time and then suddenly ignites. Now, this foil may not be pretty, but it's reflecting all the heat back. You can put your hand on the foil and it's stone cold, and the cupboard is now cold, and the wood behind it will be cold, and I can sleep safely knowing that the boat is not going to go up in flames. So yes, I like my silver foil, and no, I'm not going to stick tiles all over the top of it, and no, I'm not going to stick board there because there isn't the space behind it. There wouldn't be enough of a gap for me to put fireboard. I'm quite happy with this silver stuff. That's a stove fan, which is a tiny electric fan that is driven by heat from the stove. There's no batteries, just when it gets warm enough, it starts spinning round, and the idea is it distributes the hot air off the top of the stove towards the back of the boat. I actually did a review of this fan over on another YouTube channel I run. I'll leave a link to that in the video description below. Just behind the chair before we get into the galley is this tray, which has a squidgy bottom. The idea is it sits on your lap so you can eat meals off your lap while you're watching telly, that kind of thing. I just can't abide this pattern but for some reason I own this tray, so it gets used. And underneath that, there's a device I did mention in an earlier video. It's a little twin tub washing machine, which is okay. It's a little bit of a hassle to use it, but it's enough to do a few socks and underpants, that kind of thing. And so we move into the galley, which is on both sides of the boat with a corridor up the middle. There are various other styles of galley. You can get U-shaped ones and S-shaped ones, but mine is just like this. It's alright, it does the job. You can see there's plenty of storage cupboards. We'll open up those in just a second on both sides. On the worktop here I have both dog treats for any passing dogs and the very important spider catching apparatus for throwing out the spiders. Over here below the sink drainer unit, a new addition, relatively new, this double socket with USB charging points. I had that put in, it wasn't here on the boat when I bought it. The idea was I might conceivably get a full-size washing machine here, and therefore I'd want some mains electricity to run to it, which is why I've got that. The galley on a narrowboat is really not so much different from what you might have at home. As you can see, I've got a microwave. It draws 1150 watts. It's a 900 watt rating microwave, but draws 1150. They always take a bit more than their rating, and that's enough for my batteries to run it for a bit. Hammers them a bit, but it does do it. Toaster, which I don't use. I was given that for free. I've had a lot of queries about my biscuit jar after it appeared on the Exploring Alternatives video. I have no idea where it comes from. I was given that as a present about 20 years ago. So he stays with me on the boat as a guardian, and he doesn't contain biscuits because he's not airtight, and if you put biscuits in him they go soggy. But anyway, that's the cookie jar. And over here, oh look, there's me in the kettle. That's a 4-burner hob, gas hob, being fed from those propane bottles. Underneath that is a grill, and if I just remove the tea towel, you can see there's an oven as well. All home mod cons. On this side is a 12-volt fridge. The idea of the 12-volt fridges is they can run directly off the battery, and therefore you don't lose power by running a mains fridge through an inverter. The trouble with these things is they cost an absolute fortune. They're about 500 quid compared to a normal domestic fridge, which would be, I don't know, what, 150 or something like that. I've got a very, very small freezing compartment in here, but it's fairly poor. It doesn't really freeze anything, so I don't really use it. As you can see, I've got all the main food groups stored in. I've got crisps, I've got biscuits, I've got mince pies. So that's everything taken care of. I don't tend to drink cold water from the boat's tank. I'll drink it if it's been boiled, I'll have it in tea, but otherwise I fill up this 5-litre container from the water points around the canal network, and I will drink cold drinks made with the squash from that, and then I disinfect this bottle every now and again to make sure it's not getting too disgusting. I did once discover green algae growing in it and realised at that point it probably needed a bit of a clean. Still, no harm came to me. There's my sink and washing up on the draining board. Not really much you can say about that. Let's look inside these drawers and cupboards then. This is the cutlery drawer. Goes back quite a long way. Just cutlery as you'd expect. This is miscellaneous bags and washing liquids and, you know, domestic stuff. The cupboards to the right. Saucepans. And a cheese grater you can see there, and if we peer around the corner, that's my bottle of sherry, and behind there is some Gordon's gin, so that's all important. Below the microwave, the miscellaneous stuff drawer, which has scissors and string and glue and a tape measure and shoe polish. I don't know why I've got shoe polish, I never polish my shoes, and a tea cosy, just that kind of stuff. Under that is my main tins cupboard. I've got some mugs and glasses in here, but by and large this is tinned vegetables and an amazing amount of rice pudding. I always seem to pick up a tin of rice pudding when I go to the supermarket, so I've got about 10 tins of the stuff now. It's ridiculous. Down below, soya milk, because in this form it keeps for months, so it's very easy to stock up on loads of it and it tastes perfectly fine in tea, so I've given up dairy milk, and it's better for the cows that I do that anyway. So loads of tea bags, that's 480 tea bags, and you know, pasta and sauces and that kind of thing. Nothing terribly exciting under here. Just before I move on, there is one little issue that I ought to address, and that is I've had a few requests from people to do some cooking videos. Show us what it's like, they say, to cook on board a narrowboat. The thing is, I don't really do cooking. My cooking skills extend only to heating things up, like pizzas, and maybe at a push some boiled potatoes or some of those tinned vegetables. In terms of real cooking, chopping up ingredients, putting them into pans and actually making stuff, I just don't do it. I have no real interest in cooking or in food, frankly. I just eat it because I have to. You've seen that the facilities on the boat are pretty much akin to a normal house, so cooking on a boat is the same as cooking in an everyday house. And if you want to watch cooking videos, there are much better channels on YouTube than mine. It's just not something I'm going to be doing here. Finally, for part one of the tour, we come to the dinette. It's one of the areas that's had the biggest transformation. These cushions are new. Regular viewers, long-time viewers will remember that previously what I had here was not only a badly designed dinette, but it was nasty floral patterns, and I really did not like it. So I had these cushions designed and made specifically so that A, it looks nicer, and B, it's a lot easier to convert it into its bed layout, because this does form a spare double bed. You take the table off, pull out a bit of woodwork that's underneath the length of chair there. You put this back cushion as an infill cushion there, and then you've got yourself a double bed, and it's perfectly comfortable. Underneath all that are storage lockers, now far more easily accessible due to the cushion redesign. I've got life jackets and sleeping bags under there, that kind of stuff. Just as you come into the dinette, there's a fire blanket and the second fire extinguisher, and they're above the kitchen waste bin. Behind that, an electric heater, which I don't use on the boat off the batteries or solar. It's there to be plugged into the shore mains and just keep the boat from freezing if ever I have to leave it for any period of time. Hiding behind that is a Lensun flexible semi-broken solar panel that I don't really know what to do with, and the second radiator, little shelf unit with cling film, my very, very cheap and cheerful 30 quid tripod that does me for this, and very importantly, the first of 2 carbon monoxide detectors. To the right of the radiator, a little set of steps. Now they pull out at the bottom so that you can step up to and go out through the side hatch if you want. Otherwise, just sit here and feed the ducks, feed the swans, hide from the swans if they're being aggressive, that kind of thing. Incidentally, this glazed oblong frame is designed to be put in the side hatch when you want the light and the view, but you don't actually want the breeze coming in, which is quite handy. Above me in the dinette, an overhead light, LED of course, and also an air vent with, as you can see, an ingenious and highly technical bit of gauze taped over it, because I kept finding earwigs dropping down the vent from the tree above and then falling onto the table and me as I worked there. So that was nice. Above the back of the dinette, and going off annoyingly every time I cook toast, there is a fire alarm. Down to the side of the dinette, another double main socket which I had put in. There just weren't enough of these around the boat, and although you try to use low voltage stuff direct from the battery, sometimes you just need to plug in a mains appliance like the vacuum cleaner. And those are the main living quarters of my boat. Well, that's it for this vlog. The next one will cover the bathroom, or head as I believe it's known in nautical circles, the bedroom, oi oi, and also the engine room. If you've got any comments or questions, drop them down below. Thanks, as always, for watching. Cheers now. Bye-bye.